Welcome to Environmental Justice, a conversation with activist Hilton Kelley, a live webcast presented by the Catholic Health Association and Catholic Climate Covenant. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tammy, and I will be the operator for today's presentation. Before we get started, I would like to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time, you may adjust your audio using your computer's volume settings. There will be a question answer portion of the webinar. To submit a question, just click the Q&A icon on the bottom toolbar of the Zoom platform and enter your question. Please note that today's presentation is being recorded and both the recording and slides will be emailed to you. We are joined today by Julie Trocchio, Senior Director of Community Benefit and Continuing Care for Catholic Health Association. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Julie for opening remarks. The floor is yours, Julie.
Thank you, Tammy, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Catholic Climate Covenant and the Catholic Health Association in this webinar today. As you may know, CHA has recently launched an important initiative called Confronting Racism by Achieving Health Equity. As part of this commitment to end racism and disparities, we're pleased to bring you this webinar about environmental justice. Before I introduce Mr. Kelley, who we're so excited has joined us today, I'd like to share with you our reflection, and it's a video called My Toxic Reality that features our very special speaker.
I see your smoke rising in the air when you think no one is there. In the still of the night, my child starts to wheeze. Your bright, bright torch, it burns all night. To find my way through the house, I don't even need a light.
Activist Hilton Kelley's hometown is on the fence line of 8 separate petrochemical facilities, including Shell Motiva.
Well, I was born and raised in Port Arthur, Texas, on the west side of town, right next to the refineries. When I was growing up in this community, you always have a sense that, you're not going to go anywhere, you can't achieve anything. I left Port Arthur, Texas with dreams of becoming an actor and a stuntman in Hollywood. I achieved that, and it was an uphill climb, but in 1988, I got that break.
During the 20 years Hilton was in California, his Gulf Coast community suffered a steep decline from economic and environmental damage.
I decided to come back home to Port Arthur after I had a premonition through a dream to do exactly what I felt needed to be done to help uplift my community. It seemed like I was at a crossroads, and I was just so set back by the dilapidated situation of downtown, and I found that a lot of people were ill. Usually it's cancer related, and there was a large number of kids here with respiratory problems. And particularly this West Side community, because this is a fence line community right up against these industries, and they are dumping tons of toxins into the air. I know I live at the back end of town, and I should just be quiet, not make a sound. You might even find this a little profound, but me and my neighbors are a light and dark shade of brown.
Hilton spent years educating himself about policies governing industrial pollution. He became the leader of the local movement to clean up Port Arthur.
Hydrogen sulfide, nitrogen oxide. How many people know a child with acute asthma?
Hilton trained residents to measure and report the air quality in their neighborhoods.
So it's a great tool. The UV hound is somewhat of a sniffer. I hope our leaders don't conspire to circumvent, because these findings I have a sulfur benzene scent. My toxic reality. My toxic reality. Over the years, there have been a lot of incidents at the Motiva Shell refinery. We had to go after them through litigation, and we finally got to the table, and we were able to negotiate a good neighbor agreement to ensure that the community is going to be well protected. They saw that there was a need for something to be done in the area which they do business, and we applaud them for that.
The hard-fought agreement Hilton forged with Shell Motiva included a multi-million-dollar fund for his community. Then there was a 3-year fight against an incineration facility.
They were petitioning for waste from Mexico, 20,000 tons of PCBs to burn here in the city of Port Arthur.
Stop those trucks!
We did not want that toxic stuff released into our environment, so we fought tooth and nail to get it stopped, and we were very victorious in doing so. Information pertaining to some health care.
Hilton is a courageous man. Hilton has the respect of the community. They're behind him. When he speaks, they listen.
I'm glad we got you at home today, but yet take that to the doctor if you have any issues or if you have some kids in the household.
He's been persistent. When he gets hold of something, he's not going to let it go until he gets the results that he thinks it should have.
Why don't we go hit the commentaries? I've always had that kind of fighting spirit, and I saw that there was a need for somebody to take a stand for this community, and we're still fighting today.
That was wonderful. And we are so pleased to be joined today by the star of that show, Hilton Kelley. Hilton Kelley is a U.S. Navy veteran, and he's a former Hollywood stuntman and actor. When he returned to his hometown of Port Arthur, Texas, he decided to take action by addressing the environmental injustices that he found, and he challenged the environmental violations of the plants that loom over his community. We're looking forward to hearing his story and his ideas and to hear how we can be involved. If you have any questions for Mr. Kelley, you can put it in the chat box at any time and we'll get to those questions. And now, Hilton Kelley, thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. Okay, well, we'll start with this slide, pollution impacts in Port Arthur, Texas. We have many issues here when it comes to climate change and pollution. Next. What we're looking at in this particular slide is a facility called Oxbow Calcining. Oxbow Calcining is a facility that takes all of the waste from the refineries and chemical plants that's left over after they get all of the fuels out of it and other products. The coke material is something they no longer need, and they send it to Oxbow Calcining to burn, and they use it for road material like for asphalt and what have you. And if you look very closely, you can see the emissions coming from the ground level and just kind of oozing out into the environment. And as it gets further away from the source, well, of course, the smoke trail widens. Well, what you're looking at is a mixture of steam and toxic fumes. Next. This is the another shot of that same facility smoke stream that's streaming away from the source. As it gets further away from the source, of course, the area which it impacts is widened. And what it smells like when you are in that particular plume, it almost smells like someone is constantly tarring their roof while you sleep. And it kind of smells like they're right next door. Next. This is about maybe 2 miles away from that source you saw earlier. This is also Oxbow Calcining's emission stream. Now, at this particular point, it gets even wider. Some people think because they don't live right under the stack that they are not impacted. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. The further these emissions get away from the source, the more impact that they have, because the particles seem to get smaller and they cover a wider area. Next. Now here, what you're looking at is a flaring event. This flaring event was taking place at Chevron chemical plant. Whenever you have an emission event such as this, what's happening is they can no longer process the raw petroleum crude that they send to the units to break it down. So therefore, they have to send it to the flares and burn. And whenever you burn petroleum material, you can always tell what's burning because of the black smoke that pours off of the tip of the flares that's coming out of that derrick. Next. Now, this particular shot is an explosion that took place at one of the fuel storage tanks at the Valero facility. Those explosions, they really have a serious impact in the community. You can feel the combustion from those explosions most of the time about 1.5 miles to 2 miles away from the source. That particular event there, it took about 3 days for it to burn itself out. the firemen could not contain it, so they just had to allow it to burn itself out. Next. Now, what you're seeing here is another flaring event. This particular emission event was coming from the Motiva oil refinery. At any given day, you know, you always have some type of event going on in the city of Port Arthur. Now, many times what you're being impacted with, you may not see, but with flaring events, you can see the smoke, you can see the fire, and many times you can see that black soot just coming out over the community, where as it flows over the community, that black soot just sort of lights down over the community. And if you wipe your window sills, what you will find is this particulate matter all over the place on your plants and window sills. Next. This is another emission event, once again at the Chevron chemical plant. This particular emission event lasted for about 5 to 6 days. And the smoke and the opacity on that smoke, you can't really see through it, was just as strong about 5 days after the beginning of this emission event. And it traveled for up to about 7 miles away from the source. Next. Once again, another emission event. This time it was at the Valero oil refinery. The Port Arthur city members like to call Port Arthur the city by the sea, the most beautiful city, but it is a beautiful city. We love it. I grew up here. I was born here. But yet at the same time, we have been disproportionately impacted by these industries for many, many years. As a matter of fact, the big boom happened in Beaumont, Texas, about 13 miles away from West Port Arthur, where these flaring events are taking place. Next. Now, what we're looking at here is a ground level flare. One of the reasons why they invented a ground level flare, because so many people were complaining about the flaring and the smoke, and they thought this would be a better way to kind of hide what was going on at these particular facilities. Now, this facility, this is BASF Chemical. BASF Chemical is a German-owned chemical plant. In Port Arthur, Texas, we have a number of multinational facilities here that are in the oil and gas industries. And many times they come here because of the lack of regulations and the lack of enforcement, and they really enjoy that kind of support. Next. Now, this is the same facility. I mean, this is BASF, but BASF, the way I can tell whenever the flare is burning, because you can see that glow. Now, here I am about, I would say maybe about 2.5 miles away from BASF Chemical, from that ground level flare that you saw in the earlier slide. Well, this is what it looks like. This is a telltale sign that something is going on at that facility. Next. Now, this particular incident took place in 2019. This is a, I think it was called the PCT facility. It was a chemical facility. They had a major explosion due to a gas plume that somehow got loose and was ignited by a vehicle. When that happened, the whole unit blew up. It's a miracle that no one was killed. Many people were injured. Homes up to about 1/2 mile away, windows were blown out. The doors were blown off the hinges. This particular incident was on CNN, MSNBC. It was on all the major news networks in 2019. And this happened the day before Thanksgiving. Next. Now here's Chevron Chemical Plant. Now, the reason why I wanted to play this particular video is to sort of give you guys a sense of what it's like to be close to one of these flares. And believe it or not, this is a small flare, but yet it has a major impact. You can see all the black soot coming off of the tip of that flare. What they're actually burning is fuel, because they could not process it and they cannot let it sit in the lines. If you allow the raw crude to sit in the lines without being processed, and it has a tendency to get hard and not flow as freely as they would like. So therefore, they have no choice but to send it to the flare. But whether this flare is intentional or unintentional, the people of West Port Arthur are still impacted in a negative way, meaning it attacks your respiratory system. The particulate matter that rain down on us irritate the skin. And when you're breathing, your throat starts to feel itchy and scratchy. I mean, it's just a bad position to be in for a community. And we have been fighting tooth and nail for many, many years to push these guys to operate a little bit cleaner than what they are. Next. And here's the end result right here. From all the years of breathing in toxic air, our kids are being impacted, our elderly are being impacted, and many times our babies have to be given breathing treatments before they go to bed at night to clear their lungs and their sinuses, and also before they go to school. Next. And this is another little girl that lives on the west side who's being severely impacted by the pollution there. The gases, the soot, the smoke, it's really taken a toll on many of our children. And we have also looked at ways in which we can push these industries to do a buyout of the citizens in that community. Next. Now, this young man, he played football, I believe, at the Lincoln Middle School there in the city of Port Arthur, Texas, on the West End. And he had some issues with respiratory problems, with asthma. I think he had acute asthma. And so he could no longer play football. Next. Now, what you're looking at is a map of the city of Port Arthur on the south side. If you look right inside that black border there, what we've done is outline that area, because that is the area that's right up against the fence line. That whitish area up to the top part of that bordered area there, that is the Motiva oil refinery. The Motiva oil refinery is the largest oil refinery in the Northern Hemisphere. They put out 633,000 barrels of oil per day. And so within a month's time, these guys would have had at least 3 or 4 emission events. And if you look to your left, to the back of that border area, over on that end, you have Chevron Chemical, there is Valero Oil Refinery, and then we have the Veolia Chemical Incineration Facility. And so we are basically horseshoed in by toxic industries. And at the bottom of that bordered area, you'll see the ship channel there. All through the day, you have tugboats going through that canal. You have ships coming in and out, going upriver all the way into Beaumont, Texas. And as those ships and tugboats go back and forth, well, they're emitting diesel. So basically, we're horseshoed in that community. Next. Now, here's what happens at night. Many times at night, around 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, you will see oxbow calcining really doing a number on our community. They release a lot of those toxins, thinking that no one will be watching or getting photos. Well, I made it my business to kind of take a ride at night to see what's going on. And what I do at this particular point, I call our Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and we file complaints. And whenever you file a complaint, you have to say you'd like to file a formal complaint. That way it goes on record. And whenever the commissioners get around to it, they sort of call you in for a meeting and see if they could find some resolutions to the issues that the community have and that particular industry. Next. Now, you see these homes there? Well, just behind those homes, those are called silos. We have an industry that collects wooden pellets, and this particular company is called German Pellet. German Pellet, they make these little wooden pellets that are sent overseas to Germany and to England and places where they have these particular kind of stoves where they use pellets, wooden pellets, to burn, to heat their homes, and also to cook with. And many of those pellets are collected here in Texas, in Woodville, Texas, to be exact. and then they're brought into Port Arthur, Texas, and they're stored in these large silos. But many times there's so much material in there, and during the summer months, these things heat up in the core. And that middle silo, it actually combusted and caught on fire. Next. This is a night scene of that silo smoldering as we sleep. And the wind was very, very low for about a week. And the smoke from that silo just sort of poured into our community and lighted over the community for at least 4 to 5 days. Now, if you could imagine being submerged within, let's just say you're camping and you can't find any way to get out of that camp smoke. Well, that's what it smelled like for us for about 6 or 7 days straight. And then it was off and on after we finally got the state to come in to take a look at it. Next. And that's a picture I took further away from it so you could further see the smoke that's sort of pouring off of that middle silo that eventually collapsed. Next. Now here is a gentleman that I met wandering the street. Many of our elderly are succumbing to cancer, respiratory issues. This elderly gentleman was walking near my place of business, and when I went up to talk to him, I could tell he was disoriented and confused. So we got him to the hospital as soon as possible. And he didn't know where he was. He didn't know his address. And we did finally find his relatives, but he was doing fairly bad when we came across him. But yet, I mean, his future is still unclear. Next. Now, this gentleman here, he lives in a community that's surrounded by refineries and chemical plants, and also fuel storage tanks. He lives in a community called, it's called the Lower El Vista community. And this gentleman, no community should be allowed to exist in and between industries and fuel storage tanks. There are thousands and thousands of gallons of raw fuel that are in those tanks. And if one of them explode, then it would create major problems. So we can go to the next slide. Now here in this photo with me, I have on the blue vest. The two gentlemen next to me were very good friends of mine. Both of them are deceased now. The one in the middle, that was my best friend, Mr. Eddie Brown. We just buried him on the 19th of this month. He suffered for 4 years with cancer, and cancer is prevalent throughout our community. We have a disproportionate number of individuals dying from cancer. And what I'm finding is a large number of us dying from cancer now are the graduates of 1977 and 78. I came out of the class of 78. Next. Many times we go out into the community, we do surveys, we talk to the communities about certain events that took place. We ask questions about how it impacted them and their family. And so we take their information down and we collect data from them about how those emissions made them feel. And we sort of keep a log of that. Next. And many times we have to take to the streets and protest. This was a protest that was led against the German pellet company because of the smoke. The German pellet company had a fire breakout back in, it was April of 2017. And we launched a lawsuit against the German pellet company, which is still going on today because they're fighting and our attorneys are fighting back. Next. And there goes the media that was put in the paper concerning our concern for our health with this German pellet company, putting all that smoke in our community. Next. Now, here's what happens when you have climate change. I live in a community where it's a no flood zone. In other words, we live in a high ground area. But because of climate change, we have seen a severe change in our weather patterns. And so we get torrential rains, and many times that rain builds up and the sewer lines just can't, or your drainage just can't take it all. So it starts to back up. And now this is what happens in areas where there's it's supposed to be a high ground, no flood area. Next. Also, our wildlife is impacted by climate change and flooding in the marsh areas. As you all know, in the marsh areas, you have a little bit of salt water, but it's more fresh water. And whenever alligators and other creatures that live in the marsh areas are impacted with a large amount of salt water, then this is what happens. They succumb to the toxic nature of that particular fluid to their system. Next. And this is another alligator, only about maybe a quarter mile away from the first picture. I found this one. Next. This was flooding on the west side of Port Arthur. This is something that is very common during the hurricane season. Many times people have to be evacuated, but this was a very, very low flood. Next. And many times whenever we have flooding, FEMA, makes promises they're going to come in, they're going to get everything taken care of, but you really cannot go into your home until FEMA assess the damage. And many times by the time they assess the damage, the mold has basically taken over your home, and it's unbearable to even be in a home because you can smell the mold in the air. And if you can smell it, those mold spores are going into your respiratory system and they're going into your lungs, which sometimes create lung infection. And so this lady here, she was not able to recoup her home. Next. And so the Community Empowerment Development Association, we do what we can to not wait on FEMA, but we get out in the community. We try to help our elderly citizens. We try to help our single parents to have a sense of normalcy in some way. So what we did, we started a fund drive, and many people around the country contributed, and we got that money directly in the hands of the people that were hurting. Behind this couple is a FEMA trailer, and they had been in that trailer since the last storm. And many times those trailers really aren't built to last no more than about 4 or 5 years. The conditions in that trailer were starting to decay, and they were very clustered together. I mean, it was like the mother and the father in that trailer. They had some grandkids in that trailer. It's a very uncomfortable situation. So we did what we could to help alleviate some of that by giving them a gift to try to get started on building their home. Next. Now, this is a picture of my home. We went through the same thing during Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey put 3 feet of water throughout our home. My wife was so disappointed. We had got to the point to where she just wanted to knock it over. So this picture here is what it looked like throughout the whole house. And finally, we had to take down all the sheetrock and we started trying to build walls. But it got to the point to where we really had to wait on FEMA to come through and give us some funding and some support. And so I had to dip into my retirement as well to redo our home. But yet we are back in our home today, and hopefully we don't have to go through this again. But every year around hurricane season, you're sitting on pins and needles because climate change is real. I mean, we're having a large number of tornadoes and hurricanes that come through the state of Texas on an annual basis. Just last year, we had Hurricane Laura, Beta, Veda, you name it, we had it. And the city, the state right next to us is Louisiana, but Lake Charles, Louisiana was particularly hard hit with Hurricane Laura. And those people are still trying to build their lives and get back into their homes. But with this cold snap, we had a few people that died in Lake Charles because they only had tents to live in. Next.
Hello. Go ahead.
I'm Nancy Carter. We over here at 1421 Mill Street in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Me and my grandsons was getting ready to get Billy putting this stuff out, but this young man's over here from Port Arthur with the Helping Hand Service. They came and, man, did wonders. I'm talking about work miracles for us. Nothing but angels, baby. Come and cut these. I'm talking about not no liberty trees. This big old tree back here, we couldn't even see back here. All this here was clouded with trees. And Amen. It's a blessing, thank God.
Well, we're a blessing. It's a blessing to be a blessing, and we're very appreciative that you received the service, yes, sir, and yes, that's appreciated, and that's all we need to hear. You know, that God is good. I was looking out here and I was saying, well, Thomas, we may as well get at it. Boom, y'all just came. It was just like a wave just came. All right, well, you know y'all finna move on and go help my sisters. Yeah, we're gonna go around the corner, and you know what? This is what we're supposed to do, y'all. So here it is. Today is September the 25th, 2020.
And we're having a great time out here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, helping out the folks that need a little helping hand with trees. And this lady here was sitting on the porch, her and her son getting ready to try to do this. And we just stepped up. So just ask somebody if they need help. That's all you gotta do.
This came on.
All right.
Didn't have that. This came on. Bless you.
Well, God bless y'all.
Thank you. God bless
we
y'all
out to
even
go and
more.
help your sister. And God bless y'all.
Thank you. God bless y'all even more.
You're welcome.
You're doing a great service.
Amen.
Yes, so these are the kind of things that we have resorted to doing here in the city of Port Arthur. Not only do we work with citizens here that have been hurt by major storms or major flooding events, but we also try to work with our neighbors in Louisiana. And this lady, as you can see, there are more homes around her house with the blue FEMA tarps on them. And even today, many of those homes are still with those FEMA blue tarps because FEMA is moving very, very slow. I don't know if they're overburdened, but at the same time, people are still suffering from hurricanes in the Lake Charles, Port Arthur, and Orange area, but particularly Lake Charles, because Hurricane Laura really did Lake Charles a job. Next. These ladies here, this is a social and civic group. This is the Ebony Misses. Many times we partner with groups like this to sort of get the word out. And we also get them to go door to door. They all live in the Port Arthur area. And most of the time, many people are very, very happy to support the work of CETA and to help us to get out and put out the word and knock on doors and do surveys. Next. And also we had the Union of Concerned Scientists. I mean, they saw us in the media and they decided to take a tour of Port Arthur. They came all the way down, I believe, from Washington, D.C. to take a tour of the West Side community. And they were really, really just sort of disturbed by the large number of refineries and chemical plants. They had never really seen those type of chemical plants and refineries right next to communities like that. But yet they came through and they took an assessment of what was happening here. And they are one of our supporting partners. Next. And many times I'm asked to come and speak at various universities. This is Rice University. And I think Jim Blackburn is the professor of this particular class. Jim Blackburn is a lawyer, and this is his law students that are practicing environmental law. And so I don't know which way these students are going to go with their practice, whether or not they're going to work for industry, or whether or not they're going to work for disproportionately impacted communities. But nonetheless, we sort of like to educate them on what we're going through in the fence line communities. Next. And also we work with our young people, because whenever you have an underserved community, many times the people that live on the fence line of these major oil refineries that make millions or trillions of dollars every year, well, they don't hire locally for some reason or another. We have yet to fully understand that. What you have is outside contractors that come in, and they come in with their own crew. So what we've done, instead of allowing our kids just to sit and just play in the parks among the dope dealers and what have you, and fall victim to crime and gang violence or early pregnancy, we have called upon our young people to come and learn a basic trade when it comes to electrical, plumbing, or carpentry, or sheetrock replacement. That way we can have a workforce to rebuild our own community. The group that you saw earlier in the video, that was a group that I put together, and I have a work crew named Helping Hands. And what we do is go out and we service people that have no other way out. They have no resources. FEMA has basically shut them down and cut them off. And therefore we kick in and do what we can with the crews that we prepare. Next. This is a karate class. My brother is a 5th degree black belt. We not only teach basic skills when it comes to job preparedness, but we also teach young people discipline in our community through the vehicle of martial arts. Actually, this is a Taekwondo class, and my brother is a Master Billy Kelley. He's a 5th degree black belt, and I also have my brown belt. I never did get the black, but my brother took it to another level, and I'm very happy that he did. So now we're passing on discipline and respect for self and others through martial arts. Thank you. Next. And this is who I'm fighting for, really, you guys. No, I'm just kidding. I'm fighting for everyone, but this is my grandbaby. And she and I love to have ice cream together. She has developed some respiratory problems. She has this persistent little cough, and we are doing everything we can to sort of keep her away from the deep west end of Port Arthur. But you know, this is who we fight for, this generation, future generations. And I think it's up to all of us to do what we can to save the children, save the babies, save our elderly, and to help make this world a better place for everyone. Next slide. Helping hands, that's what we're all about. And the Community Empowerment Development Association brought this service to life. We just got tired of sitting back and waiting for someone to do something, and we decided to do something to help ourselves and help our neighbors. And so I came up with this concept called Helping Hands to do just that, to help those people in need that saw no other way out and there were no other resources available to them. Thank you.
Hilton, thank you so much. Most of the comments and questions we're getting just say, God bless you for this work.
Amen.
And a couple of questions that I have for you is, what moved you to become an activist? Why did you just say, this is terrible, and go on back to California and be an actor again?
Well, it's very difficult to look into the eyes of those who helped to raise you and to steer you, and to look at the babies that were here, to look at the kids playing in the parking lots. When I remember a better Port Arthur, I remember a Port Arthur where we had community centers, we had development centers, and yet when I came back home, I didn't see any of that. And it seemed like there was major issues with pollution in our area as well. I mean, the air was just as foul when I first came back as it was when I was a kid growing up here. And now having a better understanding of environmental justice and how pollution impacts us from living in California for all those years, I wanted to make a change here because too many people have died in my community, and I didn't want to see another generation be subjected to that.
Well, you made the connection between the smokestacks and the pollution and health. Did members of your community know that? Did they realize that smoke and the horrible pictures you were showing us had an impact on their respiratory and their cancers, or did you have to explain that to them?
Well, many people, it's almost like an unspoken truth in our community. Everybody knows it, particularly the elders who have worked at the plants. For those few that have, they understand how we're being impacted. But the question is, what can you do about it? Many of them did not know what to do about it. They didn't understand that there were rules and regulations that govern those industries. And neither did I until I came back in 2000 and I started asking the questions and I started digging deeper. And then I found out there was an agency called the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which is our state regulatory agency. And then I discovered that there was a thing called EPA. We have a regional EPA office in Dallas, and we have the main headquarters in Washington, D.C. And so as I dug deeper, I ran into a gentleman by the name of Mr. Alfred Dominique, who's a lifetime resident here in the city of Port Arthur. He had been trying to do something about pollution here for a few years, but yet he's an elderly gentleman. And when I talked to him about what I came back home to do, he said, well, son, it's really, really great to hear that because we need more young people to come home to help make a difference. And then he further educated me on how the pollution is really, really devastating that particular community and mainly our city and what we can do about it. He also told me about how I could go to those regulatory agencies and research who is having a violation, who is dumping the most pollution, and then we could potentially take them to court. And so when I knew we had some teeth, I decided to do something about it and started looking into litigation.
Well, you've also testified before Congress, haven't you?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I met up with a gentleman by the name of Denny Larson. Denny Larson, ironically, had an office. He was with the Communities for a Better Environment organization in Oakland, California, where I just moved from. I met Denny at a meeting here in the South, and Denny Larson was educating people on how to take their own air samples. So I started doing that work. And then I was asked by Denny Larson and CBE if I would like to go to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress. They thought I would be a good candidate because they said I've really learned the issues and that I could explain what was happening on the ground. So I accepted that offer. And before you know it, I was on a plane on the way to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress. And it's well publicized, by the way. I never thought I would be doing that kind of work and speaking before Congress, but yet, you know, I sort of sucked it up and kept myself in focus. And I just focused on the issues that my people were dealing with and how it needed to be brought before the nation. And I did my job.
We've got two big sets of questions that have come in. And one says, how can they get started? How can people who see environmental problems, structural racism in their communities, how can they get started? And the other set of questions is, how can people who are part of this call help you and help the helping hands and the organizations you work with? Why don't you start with how would they get started if they saw environmental problems in their community? What are some of the steps?
Well, if you see an environmental injustice community in your community or in your area, in your town, and you know, let's just say this is Black and brown people or disadvantaged white folks, whatever the case may be. I mean, if you know that these people are living in a disadvantaged community, first thing you want to do is identify what the problem is. If the problem is pollution, find out where your state or what's the name of your state regulatory agency. You start there with asking questions of them, and then you find out what rules and regulations do they have to follow within that state regulatory agency. And if you can't get any kind of support there, then you take it to the next level. Find out where your regional EPA office is within your state, and then you take it to the next level from there. There are laws and regulations which govern all of these polluting industries. And if it's not pollution, it could be wastewater treatment facilities or CAFOs, these huge corporate hog farms. So that's where you start. There are agencies that govern these people, and they are your state regulatory agencies. And so for the second question, how can you support our work? Well, as always, you know, resources are a big issue, and it's hard to come by. When I look around Port Arthur, when I look around Lake Charles, which is only 50 minutes away from where I'm at right now, my home, I think about all the people that are still suffering and still sitting in their homes with the FEMA blue roof on it, with pots and pans all over the place trying to catch the rain. I was particularly disturbed during this cold snap we just had 2 weeks ago here in the city of Port Arthur and all of the Texas area, really, and into the Lake Charles area. We lost about 2 people to the cold snap in Lake Charles, Louisiana, because some people, believe it or not, are in tents. They're living in tents because the houses are uninhabitable due to the mold, due to the fact the roof is wide open. So resources is always a big support, and we could get those dollars into the hands of the people that need it expeditiously. Another thing we need is data. When it comes to pollution and people being impacted by it, what I found, there's a hospital here, or was, it's been torn down now, and I think you guys may be connected with them, but yet it's the St. Mary's Hospital was located here on 9th Avenue. They just recently tore down the building, and it was a great service to our community, but now it's gone. But yet, at the same time, those facilities are very important to our community. And whatever data we can get when it comes to how people are being impacted, we need help with using your instruments to maybe take the capacity of a person's lungs, use those instruments to find out how damaged are the lungs. Let's get an assessment of how many people actually have cancer in that area. And let's push with data and information to prove that we have a major problem here with respiratory. Let's prove that we have a major problem with cancer and skin disorders and other illnesses. Liver and kidney diseases here is bad here because we have 3 dialysis clinics here in the city of Port Arthur. But most people now have to take their little rigs home with them and treat their blood and clean it themselves at home because there's no more room in the dialysis clinic. So we have a lot of major medical issues here that could be addressed with data and helping us to bring truth or speak truth to power as to how they're having a negative impact. And then thirdly, collaboration, working together. Let's find a way to collaborate. Let's find a way to share information. Let's find a way to perpetuate this work, not only in Port Arthur, but in neighboring communities like Lake Charles, Louisiana. And if we could, let's take it all over the globe, because not only is Port Arthur in this predicament, but I know there are places in Buffalo, New York that are suffering. There are places in South Philly that are right next to refineries and chemical plants that are suffering. There are places in Richmond, California, there's a Chevron chemical there that has major issues periodically. Wherever you have refineries, chemical plants, CAFOs, wastewater treatment facilities, there are issues that need to be addressed. So a collaborative effort would be great as well.
We have many healthcare people who are with us today, and we're going to take what you've just said and make sure that that word gets out. But we also have a lot of people who are affiliated with churches who are with us today also. Have you worked with local churches, and have you any suggestions for what churches can do? Or other faith communities?
I have had a few meetings at a few churches, but in many cases, I had one pastor to ask me to not pass out that pollution information in front of his church because, as a matter of fact, he retired from the plants. And so you have to be really careful. I mean, even though it's a house of God and worship, but you have regular people in those churches that a lot of them made their money in the oil and gas industry. So therefore, they don't even want to be seen as someone who is standing with someone who is bashing those industries. And really, we're not trying to bash them. We're only pointing to the fact that you're dumping illegal chemicals into the air that me and my children and my grandchildren have to breathe. And so therefore, we have a right to fight for our environmental justice rights. But yet for those churches that have allowed us to come in and hold meetings, many times when it comes to protesting, they kind of elect not to participate for whatever reason.
Well, somebody raised that question and said it seems like a paradox because some of the people in the community must earn money from working at the companies.
Right.
And that must be kind of hard to balance. What would be the economic impact on your community if those smokestacks went away?
Well, my fight has always been not to push these industries to close their doors and move away, but to reduce the emissions, to operate efficiently, to repair the equipment that's broken. Many of the incidents that take place at these refineries, chemical plants, and chemical incineration facilities is due to poor maintenance and also due to human error. So therefore, they have a way in which they can reduce the explosions, the flaring emission events, and also the leaks. But it's up to them to pay the extra dollar to put in the new equipment. But many times they don't want to spend the extra buck to make sure that their plants are operating efficiently. This is what we have found.
So you're not trying to get rid of them. You're trying to get them to clean up their act.
Precisely. Clean up your act and obey the Clean Air Act laws and regulations. Under the last administration, the Trump administration, Trump was fighting diligently, and I was asked to come up and speak before the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act committee. They asked me to come to DC last year, February, to come and speak and to talk about why the rules and regulations should not be relaxed. Trump was trying to relax all of the rules and regulations, which help to protect human health and our environment. He also wanted to eliminate the public comment period that citizens use to speak up against an industry coming into their neighborhood. Let's just say, for instance, a coal-fired power plant wanted to move right next door to a more affluent community. Well, those people have a right to speak up and say, no, we don't want that here. We don't want that pollution. But if Trump would have had his way, well, we would have been silenced and we would have had no course of action to take in the event that an industry wanted to move right into our backyards. So this is what we're up against. Many times these industries can operate more efficiently, but they don't want to spend the extra buck to upgrade their units so that they can. They'd much rather use the same antiquated equipment over and over again. And case in point, many years ago, we were told that we had to put catalytic converters on our cars as individuals. Well, that's basically what we're asking industries to do. Put a catalytic converter on your smokestacks and reduce the emissions because you're killing us.
It sounds like when it comes to advocacy, we don't necessarily need new rules. What we need is for these companies to abide by their existing rules, right?
Abide by the existing rules, which
Yeah.
many times they do not abide by, and it's cheaper for them to just go ahead and dump this toxic waste into the air instead of getting rid of it properly and just paying the fine. Many times the fine does not equal to the crime.
Someone was interested in what you said about teaching people in your community to check their air. Tell us a little bit more about that, because you said data is so important. Tell us about how community members are doing that.
Yes, well, what we've done, as I mentioned earlier, I met up with a gentleman by the name of Denny Larson. Denny Larson was with an organization called Communities for a Better Environment when we met, and he had this grab sample device called the Bucket. He started this organization called Bucket Brigade, and what it is a 5-gallon drum bucket with a gamma seal top on it, and you have an intake valve and an outflow valve. And on the other side of that cover, there's a Teflon bag that you hook to the inflow valve. You put that in, and then you take basically a vacuum, a computer vacuum, and you hook it to a tube, and you suck the air out of the bucket, creating a vacuum. So as the ambient air around you flow into the second tube, then it goes into that Teflon bag that you capture that air and you send it to a lab, and you're able to get a reading as to what you were breathing by taking that grab sample with the bucket. And so we have been very, very successful in bringing forth what we were breathing in our community by taking those grab samples and sending them to a lab and looking for specific types of pollution that we always knew what was in our air, and we were successful in proving ourselves right with that bucket. Mm-hmm. And there are other instruments out there as well. There are other organizations or companies that could come out as well and do air sampling for you as well.
There were many pictures that you showed us that were very disturbing. To me, perhaps most disturbing was when you asked an audience how many know children with asthma. Would you say, what percentage would you say the children in your area have respiratory issues? And I'm so sorry that your little granddaughter's having respiratory issues already.
Yes, if you knocked, let's just say you went through Port Arthur, I would say if you knocked on 5 doors at a time, I think 1 out of every 5 households have a child or someone in it that have to use a nebulizer or have to take breathing treatments. And also at this particular point, 1 out of every 10 houses have someone in it that's on a dialysis, and having to clean their blood. And we have a large number of people. It was a time when I first came back, I only knew maybe about 4 people that had died from cancer, but now I've lost count.
Oh, and I was so sorry to hear that you lost friends too, very recently. So that's a shame. One of the things that you did, of course, prevention is extremely important, that you prevented an incinerator from going to Port Arthur. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, the incinerator facility is called Veolia. Veolia Incineration Facility is a large incineration facility. They are global, and it's a French-owned company operating here on U.S. soil in our community. What these guys do, we didn't stop them from coming here, but what we did do is we stopped them from bringing in the polychlorinated biphenyls from Mexico to burn here in the city of Port Arthur. What this company does, they petition for waste from all over the world to bring to Port Arthur to burn, adding insult to injury, as if we don't have enough air quality issues. So what these guys are permitted to do is to petition. As a matter of fact, they tried to bring some chemical weapon waste here from Indiana from World War II to burn here in the city of Port Arthur. Someone pulled my coat on that, and we went to the state regulatory agency and we tried to get it stopped. So we didn't get any help from them. So we ended up taking the fight all the way to the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans. And eventually the military won out and they were able to transport this chemical weapon waste called hydrolysate all the way from Indiana across 5 different states down here to Port Arthur to incinerate. So we don't win every battle, but we was able to stop the PCB material from being brought in from Mexico. And one of the reasons why they claim that they petition for this waste is because they are the best in the world at destroying chemicals through incineration, and which we beg to differ. Wherever there's smoke, there's fire. And periodically there will be smoke from that facility. And many of the chemicals that they incinerate are very, very toxic and is dangerous.
Hilton, we just have time for two more questions. And one is, why Port Arthur? What makes these companies think that it's all right to pollute in Port Arthur?
Well, it's the area of least resistance. We have representation or taxation without representation. We don't have a voice sitting at the table when it comes to city council. We don't have a voice on the federal level. We don't have a voice on the state level. And this is why the Community Empowerment Development Association was born, to give our city, to give our community a voice. And we do have a website. That is why Port Arthur, because we are the area of least resistance. And most of the time, whenever I remember there's an LNG facility that was trying to locate somewhere in Boston, Massachusetts. And those folks rallied together along with their congressmen and what have you, state representatives, and they got it shut down. It ended up coming to Port Arthur. Area of least resistance, and I live in a red state, not to say there's anything wrong with being red, but yet the doors are open to the oil and gas industries here in the state of Texas. You are welcome.
Well, we've got a lot of people on this call today who are advocates, who do advocacy. And I think that they're going to add to their list of issues that they deal with in environmental justice. Just a final question for you. One person is so horrified by what she's hearing, and she said, why isn't this in the news? Why don't we hear about it all the time? And how can we raise the visibility?
Well, it's in the news, but not as frequently as it should be. If you Google the Community Empowerment Development Association or look up Hilton Kelley, and that's Kelley, K-E-L-L-E-Y. Also, let me give you our website. Our website is www.cidainc, that's CIDAINC.org, cidainc.org. And you'll find a wealth of information there, but yet more need to be done because there are people suffering in silence, and they're suffering due to the lack of knowledge and due to the lack of support. Many times your politicians are just that, politicians. But when it comes to fighting the tough fight and standing up for those communities that are suffering, well, it's hard to get them to do that because these industries, you got to keep in mind, they provide a huge tax base to the city's economic bucket.
Well, this has just been a fascinating discussion. I want to thank you. And I think this discussion is going to keep on going. I think in local communities, our members and members of the Catholic Climate Covenant will be looking locally and statewide and nationally to see what they can do. This has just been wonderful. Before we go, I'd like to ask the participants, if you could just put in the chat box, what did you learn today? And who are you going to share this information with back in your organization? Just let us know, and we'll let Hilton Kelley know. And with that, I want to thank you again, and I'm going to turn the program back to Tammy at Blue Sky.
Your support is definitely appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Catholic Health Association and the Catholic Climate Covenant, I would like to thank you for participating in today's event. The recording will be emailed and will also be posted on CHA's website at chausa.org. Again, please take a moment to complete the survey by clicking the link in the chat box. Today's program is copyright 2021 by the Catholic Health Association with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. Thank you and have a great day.